So my name is BAZ LOKAT. I work for an organisation called GeoPlace, and I have the task of keeping you all entertained after lunch and before the final call before the final host summary that closes the event. So I'm in a really unique position right now. So let's crack on. So I work for an organisation called GeoPlace. How many of you in the room have heard of GeoPlace? Okay, thank you, Graham. How many of you have heard of the National Street Gazetteer? More hands. So, as GeoPlace, we look after the National Street Gazetteer. And we're working on this project in collaboration with the British Parking Association. So Graham earlier today alluded to work that the British Parking Association are doing on APDS, Parking Data Standards. And Ordnance Survey play a role as project partner because we're involved in an EU initiative around intelligent transport systems and about making authoritative road information available to map makers. Now, all three organisations have a vested interest in traffic regulation orders and therefore are well placed to undertake this TRO discovery. So, Department for Transport, you'll have all seen this slide before. When I say before, about 2.5 hours ago. But we've been commissioned to create an evidence base to unlock the value of traffic regulation order information across the UK. So ministerial announcements and recommendations from the North Highland report, and the specific line in the North Highland report is under section 2. And it's streamlining and digitising traffic regulation orders and traffic management orders. So making Britain the best place in the world to do transport digitally, getting ready for connected autonomous vehicles, and making data available to enable innovation and economic growth. Okay. So the TRO discovery kicked off in December of 2018, and we commissioned a video in order to engage with industry at large to say this is what we're doing, this is what the project entails, so this is the video. So that consultation was launched in the middle of December 2018, and it closed middle of January 2019. And we had 316 completed responses to the call across a wide, across industry at large, and the majority of responses came from the public sector at large. So 316 completed responses and over 207 from public sector organisations. So that's 60% of respondents from public sector. So all the areas in green there give you an indication of the local authorities that responded to that survey in the first instance. And what we were looking at was actually who's engaging with the TRO discovery at this point, how they interact with the traffic regulation order process, how they're involved in the consultation element of the TRO process, and what their requirements are for data. And that set up the TRO discovery in terms of the user research that we're currently undertaking. So what is the scope? You've seen this slide before as well. We're creating an evidence base, all based around user need. So that user need is around the process in the creation, in the application, creation, consultation and onward publication of data. And we're liaising with quite a number of different organisations within that space. And we want to establish who is reliant on traffic regulation order information and why. So this is who we intend to get a view from. So caveat on this slide, size of font isn't an indication of priority. We want to understand how the process works for them if they're engaging with the traffic regulation order process or the TTRO process. So 24-step process that comes out of the legislative framework when we're talking about TRO. So you've got a number of steps in the inception, a number of steps in the design and consultation, an objection period, making the TRO, getting out on the ground, painting signs and lines, implementing it, and then any evaluation that comes thereafter. So quite an established process, but bearing in mind there are over 400 local authorities across UK, you've got different implementation of this process. Different timings involved in different elements of the process, and a whole different variety of needs that come out of it. So we understand how the process works for individuals that interact and then how we might look to improve that in the future. So what comes out of the TRO discovery itself? We've got the user research that says these are the requirements from industry, they're assessed, they're prioritised, and then some recommendations go forward to DFT on what the next steps are. But then we're also going to be creating a guide for local authorities specifically, which uses the existing legislation as the basis, but what is current best practice? So what are authorities doing at this moment in time with respect to the TRO process, and where is innovation taking place? So these are the kind of questions we are asking of local authorities when we are interviewing them. So what process exists for both TROs, temporary TROs? Who gets involved across the business? And what systems are used across the business? What are the standard course of events when you're going through that end-to-end process that we saw earlier? And what happens when it doesn't actually work? What are the most efficient and difficult aspects of the process for either individuals that get involved or from a order making perspective, from a consultation perspective? And then accessibility is a key aspect of this discovery. So how do people access the process, but how do people access data? If I wanted to go and inspect TROs or have a look at TROs, where do I go? Where do I get that information from? The other area of focus, which is going to be of value to the experts we have in this room, is the creation of a draft data model relating to TROs. So if you think about the process as a bit of a waterfall, where you've got an application, a creation, consultation, we're focusing on the bottom right-hand corner in terms of what information needs to be made available from that traffic regulation order making process against what the user need is. So we're balancing user need to say, well, this is the requirement that I have to undertake this specific activity within my business or within my organisation. But what information should come from the TRO process from a data perspective. And that covers the entire range of data around permanent orders, temporary orders, experimental orders, across moving and stationary traffic. And it's all publication orientated. You know, there's a view that this will be machine readable. We we've had a look, an initial investigation across like what standards currently exist for traffic regulation orders. Surprise, surprise, there aren't any standards across Europe or internationally that exist for the creation and publication of traffic regulation order information. So the anticipation is the UK, as part of this process, become a leading light across Europe and indeed the world. So when we're undertaking interviews with data users, we need to understand what their business is. What is the business that they're involved in? What value are they providing to their users? Fundamentally, well, how is location used in that activity? What mapping is being used and what software and systems are being used? Looking at interoperability of this specific data model for the future. Well, what data is out there that we need to consider? So this kind of gives us a bit of a now position in terms of what data is currently used to support the activity. But down at the bottom it is, well, what is your need? What is your data need relating to TROs now and in the future? So we're going to have a number of activities, a number of business use cases that require information now. We know that it doesn't exist in a common, accessible way. But what about the future, and how close is the future? So you saw in the video that we're talking about connected and autonomous vehicles. Well, we need to begin that dialogue to say, well, what are your needs? And how does that translate to traffic regulation orders? What do you need to know? Key thing for the discovery across all aspects is where are the pain points and where are the barriers with both process and data. So, this is the type of information associated with traffic regulation orders and temporary traffic regulation orders. So local authorities have the power to implement legal orders that say this is what you can and can't do on the network, and these are the type of restrictions that are associated with that. And then you'll notice at the bottom of the vehicle type load, restricted vehicle was waiting and loading. There are other restrictions that fall into that category, and that's all on local user need. What is the scope of those? We need to understand that. So the next stage of the discovery, so we're undertaking a number of interviews with a number of local authorities, other organisations that have touch points for data, touch points of involvement within process. But 3 surveys are upcoming. So one is around cost. We need to understand the costs to local authorities that are involved in the creation and administration of traffic regulation orders. So is that in the drafting process? Is that in the notification process? Advertising, consultation, objections? We need to get some granularity on that specific activity. From a digital maturity perspective, well, we don't know where we are. It's 400 organisations across GB that will all have a different way of communicating traffic regulation order information outside their organisation. And what is the digital maturity of that? So if I went to my local authority, I'd be referred to a basement filing cabinet, and I'll be looking at paper-based records. In other instances, there's an online platform where I can just go and have a look, and then you've got everything in between. So we need to understand across the country what the digital maturity of traffic regulation order information is, because that gives us the as-is position right now within local authorities with respect to the features that you saw earlier. And then there's another follow-up around data needs. So what is your requirement for TRO data? across speed, restrictions, parking, zonal information, road closures. What is your requirement? Why do you need it? What does that allow you to do that you can't do now, or that you're doing now and having issues doing now? What is required? Why is it required? And then you bring those two things together, and what you've got is essentially your gap analysis. This is what local authorities do. This is the information that's available to them. These are the needs of industry, and between those two things you've got an indication of what needs to happen next, and that will form part of the recommendations. So these surveys are integral to the TRO discovery process that we're looking to undertake. They'll be available on the GeoPlace website, and what we'll be asking is we'll be asking TDI for one to make the announcement, say when these surveys are available, but you'll be getting notification hopefully from several different touch points. So it could be from DFT, it could be from GeoPlace, it could be from BPA, or indeed Ordnance Survey on the fact that this is happening. And perhaps, Carla, we can have a conversation about contacts and how what role that can play. Okay, now to make sure you're all awake after lunch, a bit of audience participation.
All right, so this is the fun interactive bit that you've all been looking forward to. So on your phones, preferably, or on your laptop, if you can go to www.menti.com, enti.com, and then it will ask you for a code. So the code, first of all, is my age, 75, followed by Graham's age, 32. Oh, I could have done that the wrong way round, and 0. So 75320 is the code. And a couple of things while you're doing that is that this survey is completely anonymous, so please be as honest as you can. We won't be following up afterwards, so we don't know who's put what comments in, so please be completely honest. And the other thing is that we will keep the survey open after the event, so we'll get Laura and the team to send the link around to people, so the survey will remain open, so if on the train home later on you think, oh damn, I forgot to say that, then you can add stuff to it later on. Okay. So, are you all into the page? Anybody got any traumas? Everybody in? Excellent, that went well. Okay, so, Baz, over to you.
Okay. So let's start off with something light. Which one of these famous Britpop bands formed in Sheffield? So.
I used to serve them when I worked in the late shop as a student here. I claim to fame.
So I don't know if you can see them at the back, but the options are Blur, Pulp, Suede, and The Verve.
Local knowledge.
Any more for any more? Give it another 10 seconds.
There's more than 34 of you in here.
Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and yes, it is Pulp. It is Pulp. Okay. Okay, so let's get into it now. So, do you interact? So this is you and your role right now. Do you have any interaction with any aspects of the traffic regulation order? And that's from a permanent TRO perspective or a temporary order perspective.
Yes, it is. It is. Okay. Okay, so let's get into it now. So, do you interact?
Okay. That's quite clear. Okay. So, to the 17 of you that responded, What is the best thing about the TRO process? So please just give us your view in a concise way. Send that through. Nick, thank you.
When we said be honest.
Okay, anything about the consultation element and the requirement to consult? Making people aware of the fact that changes might be happening? Perhaps we should have vetted some of these. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'll say thank you. There's more to come. Okay, I think let's have a wander on to the next thing. Do I just use the answers from the best thing? I'm not quite so sure, but what is the worst thing about the TRO process? We'll give a little bit longer on this one, I think. Okay, perhaps another 10 seconds just to get any final comments. Okay, thank you, folks. Okay, this is going to require a little bit of thinking potentially. So what is the most important thing that you in your role or you as an authority get out of the traffic regulation order process? Okay. Perhaps another 10 seconds. Okay, some interesting ones on there. Okay. Thank you, folks. Do you have a requirement for data relating to TROs?
Once they're published, or
So yes, this is data. So once the legal order's in place, the onward publication of that information. How many people are in the room? Okay. Okay. We lost a couple of people along the way. Not to worry. Okay. 33. Okay. Well, let's move on to the next question, Carla. Thank you. Okay. So, how should the data relating to TROs be made available? Think about currency, consistency, accuracy in your responses. Okay. What came first, the pigeon or the TRO? Okay. Okay, thank you. Well, let's move on to the next question, I think. So this question is designed to understand what's going on that might have a what kind of initiatives are happening right now that might have a requirement or have a requirement for traffic regulation order information, and that's permanent and temporary. What is happening on your patch and what are you aware of nationally? So please feel free to be as detailed as possible in your responses in terms of the name of the initiative. I mean, what I will say is, if you want to talk to me about anything that we're discussing, then the way to get in contact will be at the end of the presentation, because this user research element of this project is expected to conclude at the end of March. So we've got, we're a little over a third of the way through the user research, approaching half the way through. So it's a case of the next month is really pivotal to get additional views, and the TDI event here today is a fantastic opportunity for us to do that. Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you, folks. Just give it another minute or so. Okay. Thank you. Got my phone ready. Oh, crikey. Let's get to the 34. Let's get to the 34. I'll cast in vote. Be kind. Oh. Maybe I should have started with this one. Yeah, okay. We're at 40. Let's use that. Okay. It's pretty divisive, isn't it? I'm going to do it. Here we go. Right, smile everyone. Thank you very much. Okay.
Is that 51.5, 48.5?
I wasn't going to make any reference to that.
Have you seen the problem with referendum?
Okay. No, thank you very much for that insight. That's really valuable given the opportunity that the TDI has presented. So what we'll be doing is using some of that information to go forward into the research that we're doing. So thank you. Okay. Now we're going to do a bit of a workshop type activity. So we want to create some user personas. So you all have different areas of work within the local authority or within the business that you're in. So on your tables, there's a handout that looks like this. And what we're aiming to do is get as many of these completed from you as the audience here at the TDI event. And we'll use the outcomes of the way these are filled in within the user research to understand, A, from a TDI perspective, who we had here, the roles and responsibilities that that you have, and then pain points and frustrations within the TRO process that you experience or that you're aware of from an authority perspective. So feel free to either take the view of yourself as an individual if you have an involvement in the process, or to take an organisation-wide approach here. So responsibilities, pain points, frustrations and needs, and then an indication of whether the need is met or not. So to give you an example, so who are you? What, a colleague from DFT went to see the DFT casework team, and this is the kind of information that was filled in the role responsibilities. So who are you and what do you do? So what frustrations did that person experience? Was it around legislation? Was it around the system? So when we're talking about a system here, we're not necessarily talking about software. We're talking about system small s here. And then work processes. So where do frustrations occur there? Are you relying on people? Are you relying on a feed of information that's not coming to you? And then the needs. Must-haves, should-haves, and could-haves. So I'll just go back to the I'll just work out how much time we've got to undertake this activity. Sorry, let's just get a couple of mics, if I may, just for a roving mic.
Tom.
Tom?
Tom.
Tom?
No?
Just mics, please. Sorry. They were talking about TROs. There's quite a discussion at the back. Yeah. Yes, please.
So, first of all, I don't know if it extends to Scotland, your work, your map only showed England and Wales.
That was an issue with the map. Apologies.
I know we've got our own legislation that's separate from the English one, but so most of us here aren't involved in creating or making TROs, but as a transport modeller, the information that would be contained in theory, so I've asked in the past if we have even a simple database of speed limits, and everybody goes, well, you might be able to buy one, but actually knowing what the real TRO speed limit is, nobody has any of that information, so we have to rely upon buying it, in a sense buying our own information back from the likes of TomTom or one of the safety camera sellers and stuff like that. So it's mainly about, getting access to our own information.
Okay.
For transport modelling, it would be very useful.
Transport modelling. Okay. Anyone else want to share?
Yeah, you actually came to Norfolk County Council yesterday, so
Okay.
I'll leave you with their thoughts up rather than mine.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone else on the table is heavily invested in TROs. So.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm sure it's someone from Gloucester City Council again. I'm sure you are aware that there's a project currently being funded by Innovate UK to look at digitising the curbside management project, parking AV, and some of the questions and some of the queries that you were asking about have been sort of investigated and sort of addressed in just trying to come up with these. And quite rightly, there are so many different variations of how to write the TRO, how to get it sealed. Some authorities seal them, some authorities don't, and it's still a paper exercise copy. So it's worth sharing our findings to progress this further if you're quite happy to share.
Thank you. Anyone else?
For us on temporary TTROs, particularly where they're coming from events that are being held in terms of those timescales, and that coming from an events organiser through the council's events team, through our PFI contractor, and then finally coming to my team to actually apply for that TTRO with the appropriate diversion routes. That is just a bit of a logistical nightmare in terms of people who have either not planned their event properly, left it to the last minute, and then there's political pressure about, oh no, we've got to hold this event, it's a major event. It's just very bitter, and at the end of the day we're saying this is legislation, this has to be in, we have to get this submitted, because of the timescales. It is a complicated, the TTROs are much more complicated, I think, than the TROs.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay. Thank you for taking part in that exercise. If I could ask you, for those of you that took part, filled it in, just make the paper, just make what you filled in available so I can see it and I can take that back with me. In terms of all the information here, we'll take a look at it and then we'll see if we can use it in the TRO discovery output. So all information is valid from this activity and it will be used within within the scope of the user research that we're undertaking. So thank you for taking part in that exercise. So that was the I'm done. So yes, thank you very much for taking part. If you want to know any more information, visit the site here. The slide deck will be circulated. For more information, there's an email address there to contact us. I'm going to be around for a little while at the end of this if anyone wants to come and speak to me about TRO specifically and how to engage within the user research element of the activity. So thank you very much. Okay. Second clap. Second clap.
Was that good? I'm just going to do a few closing remarks before we break and get our trains. A few of us will be hanging around for a bit afterwards. Thank you. If you've got any questions, I'd like to first of all thank you all for attending again. It's been a really valuable session for us at the DFT and our colleagues in Innovate UK, etc., and our friends and work in various discovery projects. Thank you for that. Thank you for the TDI Secretariat who've done an excellent job today. I thought it's been very slick. Very well organised and a great venue. We covered a lot of ground today, a lot of ground, and I was really impressed by the questions we got today. So it was quite sort of some very meaty, challenging, insightful questions, which is kind of what we want. And it allows us to go away and think and develop our policies, etc. I think sort of some really good stuff in here in terms about moving forward, and I think the things that really struck me were, you've got some usual stuff in here that you'd expect, such as around, you know, the thing about capital versus revenue and stuff like that. That's kind of always comes up, but it's kind of, in this context, it's very much moved to this idea of moving to new business models and value sharing arrangements. And Walter's point about trying to get some economic analysis into this, and in understanding the commercials and how can we make these models work was a key theme for me. I thought also I sort of really saw the value of engagement today, and I like BAZ's phrase actually about it's no engagement, no evidence. And I think actually the more we can all work together and actually learn the lessons and documenting stuff, the more evidence we're going to have for building these business cases, which is important for all of us in terms of getting forward the stuff that we want to. Procurement as well came up, and I think it was Giuseppe's phrase around sort of procurement and funding built on old models. And actually the fact that, you know, things are changing, we've got the future mobility, grand challenge, etc. And this is an opportunity to do things in a different way. And I encourage you to engage in that process. And I'm keen to get some future mobility colleagues to a future TDI event actually to help that engagement. I encourage you to continue to look at the TDI website and the newsletter that comes around, and to engage in things like the TRO survey, and also a plug for the next event, which is going to be in Bristol, I believe, in June sometime, middle of June. Yep. And I'll hand over to David as well, because we've got another announcement to make.
Thank you, Matt. I just wanted to say a special thank you to Laura at the back. She's going to kill me for this, but Laura's been with us for a year and a half, and she's helped us massively in taking TDI to where it is now. She's off and changing career, so best of luck to Laura, and thank you so much for your hard work. And special thank you to all of you for coming along and supporting us. This is our sort of second year now, and hopefully that will continue to grow. As long as you keep coming to these events and keep contributing, that's the way it will go. Thank you.